forgive me, I don't have an iPad yet, so I have to use my MacBook in this speech, but I plan to get an iPad soon. This January, an article appeared in Nature magazine. It was the head of Stanford's Center for Law and Bioethics, Hank Greenlee. He said that within 5 years, genetic testing kits will be available over the counter that will predict not only whether an unborn baby has Down syndrome, cystic fibrosis, or Tay-Sachs disease, but also the baby's sex and eye color. This is an alarming statement, but at first thought, we may not think that. But he continues in his statement. He says, he estimates that the number of genetic tests performed on preborn babies will jump from 100,000 to over 3 million, and that abortions will be viewed as a way to save money from being spent on high-cost children. Because who really wants a child who will suffer and cause their parents burden? That's the whole point of the article. Before I had my son Gunnar, I never thought of prenatal testing as a way to euthanize children. I knew that prenatal testing was being used to eliminate Down syndrome babies, but I didn't connect prenatal testing directly with the issue of abortion because I thought, well, it's good for parents to know, for them to be prepared if they're having a child with a disability. As a pro-life advocate, I obviously was against parents who found out they had adverse prenatal diagnosis having an abortion, but I thought it was a tool. It was meant to be developed as a good thing, a tool to help parents in the age of modern medicine. Now, looking beyond the fact that some prenatal tests are invasive and they can kill the child, and the fact that they can be wrong, I now have deep convictions against the use of prenatal diagnosis. My oldest son, Gunnar, was diagnosed at 2 months with cystic fibrosis. It's a fatal genetic disease. The average lifespan today is 37 in America. At the time, my faith in my world was completely turned upside down. I had to learn to accept a lot of things. When you find out your child isn't perfect, that there is a genetic defect, you have to let go of a lot of hopes and dreams that you thought you would have and say, this is where I want to go, this is where I want my child to be. I accepted the fact that Gunnar, my precious baby boy, will never have an easy life. I accepted the fact that my husband and I, he's a school teacher, I run a nonprofit, we will always struggle financially trying to give him the best medicine possible. And I also accepted the fact that his life may be dramatically shortened because of his disease. But what I refused to accept was when we went to Minnesota for one of the doctor's appointments for Gunnar, when a genetic counselor came into the examination room, who's part of the cystic fibrosis care team, sat down with us and said, "How can I help you?" And I knew what she was going to say, said, "Well, what do you mean by help?" And she said, "Well, we can provide genetic screening for your sister and your husband's sister to see if they carry the gene. And we can also, if you decide to have another child, we can help you with the in vitro fertilization so you can create the embryos and then select the ones that do not have cystic fibrosis." How dare she say that as I was sitting in the room holding my 5-month-old baby son? At the time, I didn't know this, I was actually pregnant with my second son. She was saying that had I only had the proper IVF or prenatal tests, that Gunnar wouldn't be here, and that Gunnar was a mistake. I also refused to accept when I was pregnant with Bear, my second son, the multiple offers that I received to have some prenatal testing. He was born without cystic fibrosis, but then it was moments later after he was born, before we even knew he didn't have CF, I had to accept multiple times the offer not to have an IUD inserted in me so I would prevent the risk of having another child with CF. A few months ago, I read some great articles from Mary Meehan, the Human Life Review. You all should check it out as law students. I think you guys can submit articles to this scholarly journal. She talks about the history of prenatal testing in America and the government's involvement with prenatal testing. And I can't go into those details today, although I would love to. But I have a few snapshots for you. 1, eugenics is founded in Darwinism. The notion that only the fit should survive, that certain types of people should not use up society's resources because they won't be adding to them. 2, in the mid-20th century, the American Eugenics Society realized its name had a negative connotation. So they changed their name to the American Genetics Society. Same people, same leaders, same mission, just a different marketing scheme. The March of Dimes has been a prime supporter of genetics and actually published a journal called Birth Defects until the mid-1990s. And their agenda is working because they are curing the diseases of children by killing them in the womb. 90% of kids who have Down syndrome or cystic fibrosis are killed in their mother's womb. It's no wonder why they support Planned Parenthood. 4, Planned Parenthood, the leader of the abortion lobby in the United States, is directly tied to the eugenics and genetics movement. We know this because Margaret Sanger, Planned Parenthood's founder, was a proclaimed eugenicist. Her quest was to promote birth control for the poor and for the weak. Alan Guttmacher, the Planned Parenthood's first president, was also vice president of the American Eugenics Society. If you need more info on that, if you don't believe me, watch Moff at 21. 5, eugenics is alive and well in America. I hear eugenics statements all the time, even from people who don't realize what they're saying. Did you all see the YouTube video that I got this week? It was sent to me from my friend from Troy from Operation Rescue. It was a statement that Bill Gates had made. He was talking to young people about how to reduce CO2 emissions, and he had this formula. The first part of the formula was P. And he said, okay, if we're going to get down to 0 CO2 emissions, we got to reduce one of these 4 factors. And the first factor was P, people. And he actually said, I think we can reduce the world's population by 10 to 15% in the coming years. That's 1 billion people. And he said they'd do this by vaccines and reproductive medicines. The most recent eugenic debate took place right here in America over Obamacare, nationalized medicine. Like the issue of prenatal testing, I thought, you know what, this isn't really Students for Life's issue. I'm going to let the big kids play on this one. It wasn't until a friend at the Heritage Foundation said, Kristan, do you realize Obamacare is going to further institutionalize abortion in American society and force everyone to pay for it? I started thinking. Well, then I started thinking, what does it mean for Gunnar? What does nationalized health care mean for my son? And then I went into the chat rooms from overseas. And then I started reading articles and newspaper articles, scholarly articles from around the world. And I found some really disturbing facts. CF patients here in the United States receive the best care. And they have access to every top medicine because all the medicines and techniques are being developed right here. Patients around the world come to the United States. The United States actually has the largest percentage of CF patients in the world, almost half. While the average lifespan here is 37, in Ireland it's 27. In Great Britain and Canada, CF patients, while they're able to jump ahead of the long lines, they're not given access to the drugs and the equipment like my son, who has a $15,000 piece of equipment that he uses 3 hours a day. You can't get that over there. In France, patients are given watered-down drugs, generic versions of new drugs, drugs that cost my insurance company at least $5,000 a month. And this is just in first world countries. I can't even find data from other countries. I could speak all day long about the horrific facts within Obamacare, the pro-rationing people that President Obama has put into place in Washington, D.C. One good example is Dr. Donald Bierwick, who is the temporary head of the Center for Medicaid and Medicaid Services, the largest insurance provider in the country. He can't get confirmed by the democratically controlled Senate because he's so pro-euthanasia and pro-rationing of care. People like Gunnar in the nationalized healthcare system, make no mistake about it, they will be shuffled out of the system. Gunnar has a rare genetic disease, one that through better prenatal diagnosis will be cured in a few short years. Cured meaning no babies will be allowed to live outside their mother's womb. In Europe, we're already seeing this today. They're trying to force mothers to go through prenatal testing. And like Hank Greenlee said, they're developing cheaper and easier ways, less invasive ways, to test pregnant women. So we can tell women what the likelihood their child will receive one certain type of cancer, what color their eyes will be, what sex their child will be. But all this is being done with the mentality, not to prepare parents or help them, make a great room because they want to find out is it a boy or girl. It's being done to promote abortion, population control, and to save the state, the person who's paying for this, a lot of hassle. Gunnar's disease is extremely expensive to treat. Thousands of dollars a month for my health insurance company, hundreds of dollars a month for my husband now. Some of the treatments that CF patients receive are double lung transplants, which are extremely expensive. Some insurance companies won't pay for them, and they only prolong the life about 5 to 7 years of a CF patient. So many will argue, well, that's not worth the cost then, Kristan. Already in hospitals and medical schools across the country, not just in Canada and Europe, doctors and medical students are being told you have to think about resources when you're treating patients who have trisomy 13, trisomy 18, and Downs, because they're going to die anyway, right? A doctor told a good friend of mine, Mary Kellett, she's a founder of Prenatal Partners for Life. He told her, I have to think about resources. A few days after his birth, Peter was born, had a lot of problems. The hospital did everything they could to help Peter survive. 3 days later, when the test came back positive that Peter had trisomy 18, they said, take him home and let him die, he won't survive. It wasn't until Mary's oldest daughter went on Google and found pictures of kids who have trisomy 18 living, then they started saying, wait a minute, why is Google showing these pictures and why are these articles on Google if you're telling me my baby's going to die? And he would have died had she not fought for her son. So today, Mary goes across the country helping parents who receive these diagnoses at birth, saying, no, you cannot trust your doctor. You can't trust your doctor. You have to go to Google, you have to go online, you have to know what to provide your child and demand that the hospital do it at all costs. I have to wrap up, but I hope what I told you today was enlightening to you. I know it's something that we don't think a lot about in the pro-life movement, but you know, at Students for Life, we're working with medical students and law students to help get this issue raised in college campuses across the country. We want to partner with you. We would love to partner with you. Bottom line, I believe every American should have access to affordable, quality health care. But I don't believe they should be access to something that the government just threw together so President Obama can claim political victory. It's time to have a real discussion about quality health care and how we can afford it as a nation. And how everyone, no matter what their genetic makeup or their ability to pay, will receive it. This can be done. There have been articles and books and speakers. Everyone's talking about how this can be done correctly. This is real social justice in medicine. And I think we would benefit greatly if you all, as law students, would join in the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kristan. Kristan's I've only gotten know Kristan just recently, and she's just a real dynamo in the pro-life movement, and her voice is so important because what she's doing, she's getting the kids involved, the college students, even I'm sure getting the college students even trickles down to their sisters and brothers, perhaps who are in high school. And so she's getting our future leaders, our future doctors, nurses, what have you, involved in understanding the pro-life movement, which I guess none of us can really know the invaluable work that she's doing, educating our youth. And I went to the Students for Life, I spoke at the student, was gracious enough, I was invited, appreciate being invited to the Students for Life conference this past year in January in Washington, D.C. And there was, I believe, 2,000 students that attended. It was the biggest pro-life conference, is my understanding, biggest pro-life conference ever. And there was 2,000 college students that attended. So thank you, Kristan, for all the work that you're doing. I'm just thinking, listening to Dr. Mostert and Kristan, how fortunate we are here today to have all these just dynamic and wonderful speakers with so much knowledge. Any one of them be worth going to see them by themselves, and we're just fortunate to have all four of them here with us today. Which leads me to Brother Paul O'Donnell.